Hey guys, in this episode I'm going to talk about how you can get started with Azure SQL Database. And this tutorial is basically for people who start their project with SQL Express and now they want to go live with Azure SQL Database. So in this tutorial, we'll create Azure SQL Database. This is going to be a main step because we'll be talking about subscriptions, resources, elastic pools, tags, pricing models, everything that you need to know for creating Azure SQL Database. Once we create the database, then we'll connect to that database from our management studio. And then we'll talk about how we can migrate schema and data from our SQL Express to our Azure SQL database. And then we'll talk about the other way around, migrating data from our Azure SQL database to our local server. Okay, so for demo, I have already set up a database which looks something like this. It's a bookstores database. It's in development region and it has some tables. If I look up authors table, you can see that it will list down all the authors in the system. And now I want to move everything, even the schema and the data, to my Azure database. So I'm going to go to my portal, my Azure portal, and here I'm going to click on SQL databases. And if you already have some databases, it will list down here, but if you do not, then you can go ahead and create a new one. Create SQL database, and it will take you to form. It's a 5-step form where it will ask different things to create your SQL database. So the first thing it is asking, you can literally hover over these things to find out what they are, but I'm going to talk about what they are and then we'll create our first SQL database. So first thing that they're asking us to select the subscription. And when you create your Azure account, it creates a subscription for you. And this subscription is mapped to your billing account and you get billed by your subscription ID. So I like to create, you can rename your subscriptions, but I like to create my subscription by projects. That's how I know which project is costing how much. And then you can, scale up or scale down depending on the bills that you're getting for your Azure subscriptions. And then your resource groups are mapped to your subscription. Resources are basically anything that you create in Azure SQL. So right now I'm creating SQL database, which is a resource, and it could be a virtual machine, it could be app service, it could be Azure function. So these are the resources. You'll have to put it in a resource group, and that resource group is mapped to your subscription, and that's how you get billed. That's how you know that which group is costing you how much. So I like to create resource group by the regions. That means if I have system testing region, then I'll create a region. Then I'll create a resource group by the system testing region. So anything which is in the system testing, which will be like virtual machines or databases, Cosmos database, anything which I need in that region, I'll create a group for it. And then all the resources will be in that all in that group. So we are putting our database in production. So I'm going to create a new resource. I'm going to call it as production resource group. And here I'm gonna select that resource group for this subscription. And then when we create the database, it will get added into this resource group. And then they're asking us the name of the database. So I'm going to select here bookstores production. And then for your database, you're going to need a server. And one server can have multiple databases. So let's go ahead and create a server. This server name has to be globally unique. So let's try our luck and see if we have bookstores production database.windows server name available or not. So we do have it available and we can use this for connecting to our management studio. And then it's asking you to create the admin login name and password. So I'm going to say this is going to be Curious Drive and password is going to be something that I'm not going to share. And then I'm going to enter password again, which should match with the password here. And then it's asking you the location of your server. That means this region is something which has to be close to your client or wherever you're accessing your application from. So Azure has multiple regions. They have like 58 regions as of now. And let's say your clients are somewhere in East Coast. So, you should select an East Coast region so that, there isn't any traffic. There's not much traffic when client is trying to get to the database or, trying to fetch information. So I'm going to select East Coast and I'm going to create that server. Okay. And now they're asking us do you want to put this database into an Elastic Pool? Elastic Pool is a pretty cool feature. Elastic Pools lets you share the memory, CPU, input output request, everything from that pool. So when you create a pool, you assign a EDTU, which we'll talk about when we'll talk about pricing models. But whatever EDTUs that you're selecting, data transaction units, they will be shared across all the databases which are in that pool. I don't have any in here anymore, so I'm not going to select that, but that is how Elastic Pools. And as we go into the series, we'll talk about this more, but today I'm just gonna get started with creating the SQL database. Okay, so the next step is compute and storage. This is the most important step where you select your pricing model. There are basically two main pricing models, which is one is virtual core and other is DTUs, which is like basic, standard, and premium. So let's talk a little bit about what DTUs are. DTUs are data transaction units. This is a unit which is set by Microsoft Azure, which lets you select the performance of your machine. Basically, that means it's a combination of your CPU, memory, and input output request. So you don't have to, worry about increasing all those resources every time you have to scale up. The only thing that you increase is your DTU, the number of DTUs that you're using for your database. So I'm not when you get started, I'm not going to select the CTU, but there are three options. One is basic, where maximum you can have 5 DTUs, and then there is standard, where you can go up to 3000 DTUs. And once you move your mouse here, you can see that the price increases depending on how many DTUs you're selecting. So depending on how many DTUs you need, you can select your DTUs. You can go up to 4000 DTUs here, and you can increase your data max limit. So when you're getting started, I suggest that select the least expensive option, because these are the things that you can configure later, saying that, I want to scale up now and I want to have more memory and more input output requests and more CPUs to process my request. So like I said, there are virtual cores option, and then there are DTUs. In virtual core, you have option to select the input output request and the latency. There is general purpose, hyperscale, and business critical. And depending on how many virtual cores you're selecting, you will get billed. So if I increase my virtual cores here, you can see that my price is going up. So I am going to select the least expensive option. That's how I would like to get started. So there are actually technically 3 options that you have. One is virtual cores, other is DTUs, and the third option is serverless, which is also virtual core option. But in this option, the resources are auto scale, built per second based on the virtual core use. So if you have a server which is not used regularly and you just want to use it, you want to get billed per second, then you should go with the serverless option. And I'm gonna go with this option because I don't want to get billed if my server is just sitting there. This, you will get billed by the usage of the server. So here in serverless option, you can go up to 16 cores. You can select that, I want to have 16 cores. And depending on that, you can see the general purpose is changing here, but you get billed the same. If you increase the minimum core, you can see that estimated storage is still $5, which you can change. The estimated storage is this much is because you have selected data max size to 32 GB, and if you reduce that to 1 GB, which our database is very tiny, and the estimated cost per month will reduce to 15 cents. And the compute cost for the virtual core is by the seconds. That means you will get billed by the usage. It is auto scaled. So I'm gonna go with the least expensive option. And you can also select if you want to auto pause. That means if your server is not getting used for like an hour, then it will stop, it will pause the server, and you will not get billed for that time unless you go again and try to access your server. I'm gonna apply this pricing model and get started, and then I want to go to the networking tab. In networking tab, they will ask you how do you want to connect to your database. So there is no access, then there is public endpoint, and there is private endpoint. I'm going to select the public endpoint because after the database is created, I would like to connect to my database from my local machine. So I'm going to select public endpoint, and it asks you if you want to add your current client IP as one of the network rules, so that once you try to connect, it's not going to block your request. So I'm going to say that yes, I want my current IP address, my local IP address, to connect to this database. And then also it's asking if you want your Azure services resources to access this service. I'm going to say yes, because in future I want my web API to connect to this database, and I'm going to try and host my web API in the same Azure SQL Server, Azure resources. Okay, so this is networking. Let's go to additional steps. In additional steps, it's asking if you already have a backup which has to be stored on Azure, and you can select that backup and restore that backup when you're creating the database. It gives you a sample, also like AdventureWorks database, which you can use for play with it, or you can just say none. So whenever your database gets created, it's an empty database. Database collation is something which is used for comparing the data, and they're saying is that you cannot change this after you're done creating the database. So, and there is advanced data security, which they're saying that you for 30 days it'll be free, and after that you'll be charged $15 per server per month, and I don't really need it, so I'm gonna say not now, and then go to tags. Tags is my favorite feature because if you can tag your resources, and we discussed you get billed by subscriptions, but you can also tag your resources so that that how much you're getting billed just for databases. So let's say if I have databases in system testing region, UAT region, and production, and I want to just get the cost of how much database is getting how much I'm getting billed for the databases, then I can just have like one tag assigned to all the databases, and then I can see that how much I got billed for just databases. So I'm going to select here, I'm going to say this is production tag, I should say production DB, so that I know this is a production tab. And then I'm going to select let's close that. Then I'm going to select this as the value, and then you can see that we are creating SQL database and SQL database server. And the next step is it will list down the summary of what you have selected, and once just to check if you have not made any mistakes, then you can go back and change your pricing models or name of your server, anything like that, and then you go ahead and create your server. You can also see the client IP, it's listed down here, so that this is something which will be able to access this database. Once I click on create, it will start the deployment process for creating the database. This usually takes a couple of minutes for creating the server and the database, and everything that it needs to create. to create the database. So, you can make yourself a coffee or take a bathroom break. This takes a couple of minutes. So I'm going to pause here and come back once this is done. Okay, so this is done now, and you can see that, the deployment is completed, and then now you can go to the resources to check if all the resources are created or not. So you can see that it created bookstores production database. And if I go to the resource, if I go to home and resource group, and you'll see production resource group, and you can see it created a server, a SQL server, and production database. And if I click on this, you can do different things, which we will check out in the series. But today we just want to get started and migrate our data to this server, right? So if I want to connect to this database, what I need to do is, the only thing that I need to do is like copy the server name, which is bookstores production database.windows.net, and I'm going to copy this and go to my SQL Management Studio, and here I'm going to say connect to a database instance, and paste that name, the server name, and here I'm going to select SQL Server Authentication and enter the username and password that we created when we created the server, which was QS Drive, and the password that I selected. And when I say OK, it will list down the server which we created. And if I open the database, then you can see that it shows the bookstores production database that we created. Awesome, right? And here you can see that there are no database tables, and now we would like to get the database. We'd like to get the database from our local server to our production server. So to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on my development region here, my development SQL Express database, and then go to task and say that generate scripts. And here I'm just going to select database tables because I don't want everything else to go with it. Actually, I was facing some errors with user defined data types and users, and I don't really want it. So I'm just going to select the tables, go next. And here you can select, you can either generate the script and save it, or you can have it in clipboard, or you can save it in new query window, which will create a query window. So I'm going to select a new query window, but before I press next, I'm going to go to advanced here and say that I don't want to just get the schema. I would like to get schema and data. And then I'm going to say I don't want to use database because, the name of the database is different. So I'm going to select this as false, click on OK, and then press next and next. And this will go through my local database and generate the script. It'll generate the script which I can use for creating the data, for creating the tables in my production database. And after it is done creating all the tables, you can see that there are some insert queries which will insert the data which is already there in my database. So I'm going to copy the script. And say new query in my production, and I'm going to paste that query and run that query. So depending on how big your database is and how good your internet connection is, and what kind of processing power that you selected for your Azure database, this will take time. So for me, it took only 9 seconds, and you can see that it created all the rows that I needed to create for my database. So if I open this up and refresh my tables here, you can see that all the tables that we had in our production are listed down in our all the tables that we had in our local are listed down in production. and you can also query your tables and see all the details from the database. Awesome, right? And same thing that you can do if you want to get the data from your production and put it in your SQL database, in your SQL Express database. So for doing that, what you can do, you can just right click on your production database, generate script, and I'm gonna select only tables, go next. Here I'm gonna say save it to new query, save it to new query window, go to advanced, and I don't really want only schema. The only thing that I want is data, so I can select data and go next, and it will generate the script for all the data which is already there in my production, and I can copy this and paste it in my local server to get the data from production. Awesome, right? So this is what all you need to know to get started with Azure SQL database if you're creating if you want to go live with your project. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me on Twitter or Facebook, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching. Bye.